Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly, brought to you by ReplenishingCareTechnologies, Inc.com. I'm your host for the boxing show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good afternoon, Mike. How you doing? I'm happy to be here, man.
All right, and when you say good afternoon, it's not near as creepy as when you say good evening. But also, I want to bring in our lawyer from West Virginia and the originator of the original 8 Grueling Truth rankings, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good to be here. We are providing the fans with some frequent podcasts, which is a good thing if you love boxing. We're keeping up with everything.
All right, so let's talk about last night's fights. It was a good card. I mean, the Alvarez-Pascal fight, I think, turned out to be better than what most people thought. Alvarez wins a majority decision because one of the judges was obviously smoking crack during the fight. But Alvarez, I thought, handled the fight. I thought he won it 9-3, 8-4. He looked solid. Pascal, I think, to me, Jeremiah, looks like he's still got a little bit left in the tank, at least, to make this at least a nice win for Alvarez.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Alvarez doesn't really have a stacked resume, so I think the addition of Pascal on it is nice, but my problem with Pascal is clearly he's aged, and on top of that, he just fights in spurts anymore. I mean, he let his hands go, maybe 15 seconds of every round. He just didn't do enough. But Alvarez boxed nicely. He looked pretty good. I think this sets up what should have already happened, but a nice match against Adonis Stevenson.
All right, John, we talk about Pascal. My thing with Pascal, Jeremiah also, but to me, I mean, you could tell he's shot because of what you said. He just doesn't throw that many punches anymore. Kind of like Klitschko. Klitschko's like a burst fighter now, and then he sits back for 2 or 3 rounds and doesn't do anything. How much credit do you give Alvarez for this win, John, and what kind of shot do you give him against Stevenson?
I give him very little credit for the win. I saw this card a little bit differently, Mike. Not to be too grouchy, but these were guys we knew. So that was I was a boxing fanatic and close observer. I was excited to watch the fight last night. So don't get me wrong, but outside the fact that we knew these guys, Stevenson-Fonfara won. Was really, there was a fight that had some knockdowns, but it really wasn't a particularly close fight. And John Pascal, as much as this pains me as a traditionalist, John Pascal benefited from an era where the better guys, unfortunately, again, to me as a traditionalist, were fighting at 168 pounds. Fighters that I think a lot of people love, that I think are maybe slightly overrated, but unfortunately I've got to admit they were better than the light heavyweights at that time. People like Frosch and Kessler. Of course, Andre Ward's for real. He's at the top of the light heavyweight division. But some of those other 168-pound guys, Abraham, those were guys during that period of time that really would have been the top-ranked light heavyweights if you were going under the original 8, as we know I like to. So what I'm getting around to is I'm not sure John Pascal was that great. Now, he was the linear light heavyweight champion of the world, legitimately, no argument there. But, again, it pains me to say it, but I think that era was diminished by the unnecessary double weight classes between 160 and 175. I don't think Pascal was ever that special. He was just he doesn't punch much. He never punched that much. He has those wild swings. His technique's not that good. And I don't think Alvarez is bad. I thought he looked okay. I'm not going to get on him too much. I don't think he's a bad fighter. I think as he just started to get into our consciousness, this what we're all kind of starting to correctly call a golden era of the light heavyweight division that's starting now, where this is just a murderer's row. All of a sudden, even though he's legit top 10, he's in my top 10, even when you rank the 168 and 175 together, he's just not, in my mind, going to hang with these upper guys. I think even though Stevenson's 39, I think he beats him. I don't know why, in God's name, Stevenson paid Alvarez step-aside money. To me, he's one of the couple of guys in the legit top 10 that Stevenson still beats. So I guess he just wanted an even easier mark in Fonfara, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. I mean, all these guys are under the PBC, but Banner involved with Al Heyman, so I just couldn't quite figure Stevenson-Fonfara 2, and that indirectly then caused Pascal to have to fight Alvarez instead of Alvarez fighting somebody else. But I don't see Alvarez, in my mind, I certainly don't see him beating Ward, Kovalev. I don't see him beating Stevenson. I think Vodstick would crush him. Peter Biev would crush him. I think Joe Smith would knock him out. I think that Sullivan Barrera would knock him out. So what are we left with? He can beat guys like Cleverly. Any other candidate? Anybody got any other candidates?
No, and that will lead us to, of course, the self-proclaimed king of the light heavyweight division, Adonis Stevenson, knocked out Fonfara in 2 rounds. He'd already beat him before, but at least when he beat him before, Fonfara was on a little bit of a roll. Since then, Fonfara has been knocked out in 1 round by the aforementioned Joe Smith, which I would have much rather seen Joe Smith fight Adonis Stevenson last night. But I think it's become relatively clear that Stevenson wants to have no part of anybody that has any shot at beating him. Hell, it wouldn't surprise me to see him try to pay step-aside money to get around Alvarez and fight John Pascal next. John, do you think Stevenson is the lineal light heavyweight champion? I know we talked a little bit about it last week. I don't think you do. I don't think anybody does anymore outside of Stevenson's immediate family. But what's your take on Stevenson and his performance last night?
I got to say, I mean, to me, he's not. It pains me because I never thought I'd be considering a lineal champs script. I hate to do that. I hate the out-of-the-ring politics. I want fights decided in the ring. I concluded there was no choice with Stevenson with how he got the lineal title. I think that's underrated. Maybe people think I'm getting in the weeds, but we're all boxing historians here. And the Ward-Dawson fight would have been, under traditional standards, would have been a light heavyweight title fight, even though it was fought at 168 pounds. So why I mention that is that, Stevenson then knocking out Dawson after Ward did wasn't a big deal to me. That's how Sugar Ray Leonard got his claim to a light heavyweight plastic belt when he beat Lalonde and picked up the newly created WBC super middleweight title at the same time. So it's even happened in relatively recent boxing history, considering how far boxing goes back. But for me, that was it for Stevenson. Basically, the final decision was his original lineal title claim was not as good as the normal lineal title claim, so to speak, but I had him there anyway because that was the consensus. Then he did not fight anything resembling top 5 opposition for at least 3 years by anybody's count. So that's it. When you've got the 1 and 2 guys fighting 2 times in a row in Ward and Kovalev, that's got to decide it for me at this point. But for Stevenson's sake, I think he looked good with what he does, which is he has a bazooka in his left hand. He throws it continuously. That's pretty much the extent of his offense, but he hits hard enough with it even at 39 years old. I don't question his power at all. You can just see the way guys react. Fonfara just couldn't take his shots at all. He'd been knocked out by Smith in 1 round, like you said, and the punch resistance just wasn't there. And it wasn't there particularly well the first time, even though he went the distance. So it wasn't there at all. It confirmed why the odds makers, they are not always correct, but they know how to handicap things. They have to. It's their job. Their livelihood's on the line. They had Fonfara as a huge underdog, and we all saw why about 30 seconds into the first round of the fight.
All right, Jeremiah, your take on the fight last night?
Well, it ended a bit sooner than I thought it would, but, besides that, Fonfara just looks shop-worn, in my opinion. Prior to this fight, I don't think anybody would have accused him of having, great head movement. He wasn't Joe Frazier in there, Jack Dempsey in there bobbing and weaving and, banging into the breadbasket or anything. But he wasn't quite that easy to hit in the first go-round. He just looks to me, again, like he's shop-worn. He was eating straight left hands. Stevenson looked like he could do whatever he liked in there. It was almost as if he couldn't miss the left hand. It just kept banging Fonfara's head back. And I thought maybe even in the first round that they could have stopped the fight, because, again, Stevenson was banging him off his skull, a bunch of times right before, you could see the ref was about to step in and say, hey, that's enough. But I think the ref thought like a lot of us where, we understand that Fonfara is a tough guy. He does have a lot of heart. Maybe, just maybe he can, work his way back into it. But as soon as the round started, it's just Stevenson, pinging him off his head once again. So, unfortunately, I wasn't impressed with the performance. I mean, nobody really wanted to see this fight. I think most of us were hoping for something like Joe Smith Jr., even Alvarez would have sufficed for the time being. Still not. That's still not what we want to see. But seeing as Alvarez is based out of Canada, and like John said, he's a guy who legitimately cracks the top 10. Yeah, that would have worked for a little while. But still, you expect more from a guy who claims to be a king of a division that's as hot as this. And
the pathetic thing is, Jeremiah, the supposed king of this division, when they ask him who he wants to fight, doesn't even bring up the winner of Ward and Kovalev.
No, you know what he says? He says Al Heyman is his matchmaker. He's the one who's going to dictate terms. I can't get behind that. I mean, boxing is a sport where, because it's individual, it's man on man, mano on mano.
How many times have we heard of boxers demanding of their promoter that they want to fight somebody?
Exactly. Look at Vasil Lomachenko. He's under Bob Arum, who is, obviously one of the biggest promoters there is, but he demands fights. He's saying, hey, what did he say? He said, get me a title fight by my second fight. What did Arum do? He got it. When you're a guy like Stevenson, who has had a title for a long time, you have some leverage, especially in Al Heyman's stable. And especially in a division at 175 where there's a ton of guys to fight, there's a bunch of good matchups to be made. And everywhere I saw on social media, virtually nobody was impressed by this performance. I mean, Stevenson did what he had to do. Good for him. But unless he steps up the competition and fights one of the best, we're not hearing it. I mean, Douglas Fisher said this on Twitter last night. Kovalev and Ward, the rematch, that is for the crown. And I think we all get behind that. And until Stevenson starts upping his game, he's quickly becoming irrelevant.
Yeah, and to me, I know you did your original 8 this week for the light heavyweights. It was out today on www.thegruelingtruth.net, John. When I look at this, I don't even think Adonis Stevenson has done enough in the last 3 years to even warrant being ranked as high as you've got him.
No, I feel he has, Mike. I don't want to. That's why I don't want to be unfair to the guy. We're in a different era now. Even though it's been 3 years since he faced some of his better opposition, Fonfara, Bellew at the time he faced him, his resume was not worthy in the last 3 years of a lineal champ in a division this tough. But in today's boxing, the guys he did fight and knock out really actually is a little better than a lot of resumes you get nowadays. And one thing, I know that the ring has indicated this on some occasions, and I agree with it, and I feel this with Stevenson being 3. The good thing, if you're being fair in vacating a title, is if you're truly being fair to that fighter, if he still comes out on the high end of the rankings, which most times they will, in other words, I've got Stevenson at 3. What that basically says is, look, Ward and Kovalev, unless there's a draw, somebody's going to lose on June 17th, and they've already fought once. If Stevenson stays at 3, or maybe one of those guys performs poorly and drops below him, then, he can say, hey, I fight the guy that won, and it's for the title.
The problem is he won't say that.
No, he won't. The only thing, I think the only hope fans have is outside, and I think he's done this to get these guys money, frankly. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Outside of Daniel Jacobs, who I believe Al Heyman has always had hopes for, has future hopes for, and rightfully so, and for good reason, as there were credible reports that HBO wants to cut a deal with Heyman, who doesn't normally deal regularly with HBO, to have Jacobs fight for them. But, of course, Showtime wants him as well. But why I'm mentioning him is Heyman crossed him over to HBO to fight Golovkin, and that was a service to the fans. That was the legitimate 1 and 2 middleweights, with Alvarez being the lineal champ fighting. But what I'm getting to is Heyman has crossed over a slew of guys now over the last year, 18 months, that he felt basically were going to lose to a top HBO fighter. Guys like Felix Diaz, Dominic Wade, John Molina. So he's offered these guys up as opponents when I believe he correctly felt that Chavez, that these guys had gone as far as they were going to go at this point, and his best job for them as manager was, if there was going to be big money on the other side of the TV promotional divide, let them take it, let the other competitor televise it, and then that was going to be, in essence, the end of the line for those losers in terms of any high-profile action. What I'm saying is Stevenson's 39. I know Jeremiah and I have talked about this a couple of years ago, but for some reason this seems to keep going on. There's got to be a cash out for Stevenson somewhere real soon. And
the cash out has to be Ward or Kovalev.
That's what I'm getting to.
Because I don't think there's anybody else that's going to bring him that kind of money in the light heavyweight division, even though it's stacked. Ward and Kovalev are the draws.
Exactly. So Al Heyman, I respect his managerial acumen. So of course, I have no evidence of this, but you would guess behind the scenes that the discussion might be, Adonis. Time for the cash out. Of course, they're not going to call it that, but if you got to fight the Ward Kovalev winner on HBO, and we can work that out with Showtime. It's time, or some kind of Showtime HBO agreement, like with the Klitschko Joshua, even though that was hard to work out. That's what you would think. Now, again, I'm speculating, but here's where I got a hunch the difference is, because if you look at what happened with Beterbiev in the last week or so, he's trying to break off from Michael, and he's also, been dealing with Al Heyman. So the point is, I don't have the direct evidence, but I'm going to guess, an educated guess, that he's the sticking point, that he doesn't want to cash out Stevenson like that. He's got Alvarez biding time, taking the step-aside money from Stevenson. It's the same management. So obviously they're orchestrating this, and whatever he does in Montreal and whatever the numbers are for Live Gate, because then it's got to be a Live Gate type of thing, he seems to want to extend this stuff forever.
And let me jump in real quick. One thing that I find interesting too is I actually think it's a good thing that Al Heyman is working. It almost feels like he's elbowing his way into HBO, and I think I would like to see HBO and Al Heyman negotiate. And I don't think Arum, I don't know if he's lacking foresight or what, but if Al Heyman is able to kind of work his way into the HBO promotional side, that might be bad for Bob Arum, who, Arum and Heyman, they haven't really, gotten along lately. They haven't been wanting to promote cards with one another. If Heyman is able to get an in there, and with HBO, being standoffish with some of the cards that Bob Arum is putting together lately, you never know. Al Heyman might be able to take over the HBO realm as well.
Yeah, I agree with Jeremiah. There would seem to be an opening there. Arum, we keep discussing, but we're not picking on Arum and Top Rank. We're just stating the facts. No matter how long he's been doing it, I agree with Jeremiah's assessment. He hasn't shown foresight as a promoter for a good 20 years. So, he's not giving. I'm with HBO in that, even though I'm a boxing fan. I mean, when you're not getting quality and you're paying out this money, you got to draw the line. So if they're not giving Arum and Top Rank bait, I'm with HBO. You've got to draw the line, and if that provides an opening to Heyman, we know that they've inquired about Jacobs. Maybe if more gets going there, that would be good, and we can get something going.
All right, so let's go ahead and look at your original 8. I mean, we got Ward Kovalev fighting for a second time. Now, the one thing that could really hold everything off here would be another close fight. Maybe you get a third fight. You don't know what Stevenson's going to do, but if he fights Alvarez, I mean, you got guys like, Joe Smith, Arthur Beterbiev. A guy like Marcus Brown is a guy I'm excited to see in his next fight, July the 15th. I mean, where do you guys think this division is headed? What guys do you think are the biggest threats to threaten a Ward, Kovalev, Stevenson? John?
Yeah, I love what's going on right now. We talk about this. You and I, Mike, have talked about it, and Jeremiah and I have talked about it. I mean, everybody who's followed boxing for a long time or is a historian, the late 70s and early 80s was just such great action for light heavyweights, and it looks like we're here. As great of an era as that was, it looks like we're here again. And I think Jim Lampley, I mentioned in one of my articles, but I don't love everything Jim Lampley says all the time, but I think one of his best points in recent years, and I think you saw evidence of that last night with Stevenson-Fonfara. These light heavyweights can come into the ring at the weight that heavyweights were, in the Joe Louis era. And what I think is exciting about that is as great as the late 70s, early 80s light heavyweight era was, and those fighters were great. And I'm not saying these guys were better fighters. All I'm saying here today is these guys, with that extra weight they can come in at, they're banging people out of there like heavyweights in the past era. So you have the excitement of more punches being thrown, but you've got now a one-punch element in the light heavyweight division that you really haven't had in history. I've also read neurologists say that anybody, about 188 pounds or so can theoretically throw a punch hard enough to knock out anybody of any size. So when you get up over that 185-pound level, you start seeing these sudden blast outs, which are exciting, frankly. So, it could be as good of a time for this division as ever. It's got all the talent in the world. Everybody that I have in my original 8 top 10 real tough. It's the only original 8 division where nobody from the junior or super division has been able to crack the top 10. That tells you a lot right there. Now, I'd be the first to admit, Nathan Cleverly's hanging on by a thread at number 9. Really what that is giving him at least fair credit for beating Brammer, who was hanging around for a long time, despite the fact that there was an injury involved. I don't think Cleverly's going to be able to beat these guys behind him just outside of the top 10. I don't think, he probably beats Badu Jack. I don't think he beats David Benavidez. There has been talk about Bivol fighting him, and I think Bivol blasted him out of there. So I just think, in fairness, though, he cracked it for me, but I see the argument against it. All the other guys are tough, even though I've criticized Alvarez some. He's still not a bad fighter. But, you look at these guys look how good – I've got Gvozdyk at number 4. Look how good he looked in his last fight. Biev's a destructive force. He reminds me in some ways of a Tyson with his physical stature and where he fought in the amateurs. Joe Smith, Jr. can knock down a house. Sullivan Barrera had a great performance against Shabransky. His only loss is to Ward. You've got Marcus Brown. Mike, you said you liked him. I like Marcus Brown a lot, too. I've argued with some people about him.
Yeah, I saw him on the Broner-Granados undercard, and, he's well put together. He's got a nice jab. He goes to the body. He beat the hell out of Thomas Williams, which, may not be a huge one, but Williams is a solid fighter. I don't think he's anywhere near a top 10 fighter. But the only place that I really disagreed with you would have been the Cleverly, and I'd have put Badu Jack or James DeGale in there instead of him.
Well, let me just hold on. People are saying that, but DeGale can't handle guys like, I'm going to say it right now with the shots he's been taking. He can't handle guys like Bivol. He's not going to handle. I don't think he can handle David Benavidez at this point.
Yeah, neither can Cleverly.
No, he can't. He cannot.
And really, Benavidez is a guy that I really like, and he may be a top 10 guy right now. I just don't think that he's beaten enough quality competition to deserve to be ranked in the top 10 right now. But I would give him a shot against a few of those guys already in there.
He'd be like a guy like an Errol Spence, though. I think you can use that with certain special fighters, so to speak, and it's not unfair. I think he beats Cleverly. He has had fights where he's weighed in at the light heavyweight limit. He's cut recently. I've said it before. I think that they're looking at the 168 being kind of the training wheels for him. I think that at cruiserweight they're doing that with Gassiev as well. And, business-wise, it's not a bad strategy. I can't argue with it business-wise. But I think that these are guys, Gassiev at heavyweight, Benavides at light heavyweight. They're going to be right in there competing, with the best before it's over.
All right, Jeremiah, I know you love to pick apart John's work, so you want to take a shot at his top 10 and let us know what you think about it?
Yeah, of course. I always respect the work that John does, but I would agree with you, Mike, is that Cleverly, for me, the win over Brammer to me isn't, that was a close fight, if I remember correctly. For me, Cleverly, I don't really see him beating any of the top dogs. I'm not even sure he beats Badou Jack or James DeGale. That to me is iffy, and I'd probably favor both of them over Clever, to be honest with you. And I'd probably rate Jack and DeGale over Marcus Brown too, who, again, Brown's best win is his last one out, the Thomas Williams Jr. thing. And I'd rate DeGale's resume and Jack's resume over that. And I'm not quite sure Brown, would run over those two either, especially Badou Jack, who I think he's a physically strong guy. I don't think that's going to serve him as well at 175. But against a guy like Marcus Brown, I think he would do pretty well. The thing about one of the things that I really like about the division that I want to note is not only is there a lot of talent, but there's some styles variety. You know what I mean? Ward is more of he's not a pure boxer, but he's more of a boxer. Stevenson, southpaw. Brown is a bit more of a boxer. Alvarez a bit more of a boxer. Cleverly doesn't mind laying back as well. But the saturation of punchers is one thing that I think we can all take a keen interest in. Kovalev is a massive puncher. Stevenson is a massive puncher. Gvozdzik can really bang. Beterbiev can really bang. Smith Jr. can really bang. Gonzalez is a good puncher. Benavides is obviously a good puncher. Jack's not bad. Bivol looks like a pretty good puncher. So there's a lot of variety there. And so I think there's some interesting matchups to be made. And there's also some, you have that typical crafty veteran fringe contender like Chilemba. You've got Shabransky, who's kind of a fringe contender now, but can provide some exciting fights for, men who are up and coming. One thing that I also like about the division is not only how packed it is, one thing that I kind of have a knock on the division for is that it is a little bit older. That's my only problem with it. I think you could make a case that this division is 30 deep, but you look at Ward, he's about at the end of the road. Kovalev, I don't think has too much tread on the tire left. Stevenson certainly doesn't. Gvozdzik's over 30. Beterbiev is over 30. Smith Jr., I think he's in his late 20s, so he's probably got some mileage left. But that's my only knock on the division. But, to pick apart, John's a little bit, I'd probably take Cleverly out, Brown out, and put Jack and DeGale in.
Yeah, and see, the reason I think that John's comparison to the late 70s, early 80s light heavyweights is dead on, because if you look at those guys, that was an older division at that time, which is why once Michael Spinks moved up, you didn't have much left. But when you look at guys like Michael Spinks, Dwight Braxton, Mike Ross and Jerry Martin were good fighters. Those were guys that would have been probably like your Nathan Cleverleys back then. You had Matthew Saad Muhammad, who was never in a dull fight, Dave Conte, Yaki Lopez. You can go on and on with the division back then. And if you look at it, most of those guys were punchers, and most of them were over the age of 30 at that point. That's why that division was extremely exciting for Victor Galindez. I could go on. It was just as deep as it is now. Most of these guys were big punchers. And if you look from 1978 to 1983, 84, I think that's why this comparison is so dead on, because really there was no young guys in that group either. They were all veteran fighters. Different styles. Most of them could get you out with one shot, and that's why I think John's comparison is dead on for the light heavyweight division.
Yeah, and it's true. And again, with the original 18, let's remember that in that arguably the greatest era of the division, Michael Spinks was a middleweight in the amateurs. Marvin Johnson was a middleweight in the amateurs. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad was a middleweight in the pros, as was Matthew Saad Muhammad. These guys didn't have any problem fighting at light heavyweight and providing some of the most exciting fights of all time.
Yeah, and there is a few young guys that I'd like to see, where they're going to go. Guys like Callum Smith, who's supposed to be fighting Durrell, in short order. That, I think, will kind of turn the tables and see what he's got as well. He's a sizable banger, likes to go to the body. I think he's a bit better than his brothers, so that's one guy I'm interested in seeing as well.
Yeah, I think Callum Smith and David Benavides can get in this. Smith, to me, is not like you're, again, generalizing, but he's more of a puncher than a lot of the guys you see coming out of the UK. He's got great physical size.
And he goes to the body really well.
Yeah, he does appear to be a guy that's much better than his brothers. And I think he will beat Anthony Durrell.
You think he's a better prospect than Gilberto Ramirez?
That's a good point, Jeremiah, because those two I always kind of compare. I like the way Ramirez goes to the body, and he shocked me with his versatility when he decided to box Abraham more. Sometimes I don't like that if a guy's getting too cautious, but when he did it, he really was showing some legitimate versatility. But then we get back to the top-ranking Bob Arum thing. He lays off. He fights a no-hoper on some hidden pay-per-view top-rank card that had no business being on pay-per-view. Nobody announced the numbers. It had to be an absolute embarrassment. They were so low. So he's been inactive, not against top competition since a good performance against Abraham. And if he would have built on that, I would have had him right there, with Callum Smith getting ready to be good point by both of you that this really is an older division, as Jeremiah first pointed out, because even Alvarez is 33. So these are not young guys, but they're all good guys. And, Benavides, Smith, if Gilberto Ramirez would get back on track in terms of his opposition and activity, those guys all have good physical size, even though they've been fighting at 168 pounds lately. They should be able to get in this if they all do what they're capable of.
All right, I'm back now. My phone, for some reason, died, and I lost it, so I don't know what you guys talked about the last 2 minutes, but I am back. All right, let's go ahead. And, do you want to talk about Joel Diaz and Regis Progressus, or whatever the hell his name is, Jeremiah? Probably the biggest fight coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the many fights that Showtime is putting on that is worth watching. Unfortunately, a lot of boxing fans, they're not knee deep in the scene itself, but this is one of those fights that I think Showtime is putting on. They're doing an excellent job, and it's one to watch. Joel Diaz and Prograis, I believe that's how you say his name. Sorry.
I think it's Prograis.
Prograis. Okay.
We'll go with Prograis. It looks more like a Prograis to me.
Yeah. He looks like a Prograis, doesn't he?
Yeah. And, the thing about it is I think Prograis may have fought the better competition than Diaz right now, Jeremiah.
Yeah, Prograis he's been kind of flying under the radar. Actually, I think he's gotten less hype than Diaz himself has, but he had a nice little amateur background too. He's come out a little bit later than some of the other ones. Yeah, but if you look back on his record, he's had a few here and there that you recognize, like Aaron Herrera, who I believe he's the guy who gave Robert Guerrero a tough go. Arguably beat him. I think he knocked him down. I remember he certainly had him hurt seriously. Prograis had no trouble at all with him, knocked him out and won. Then he's fought a few other guys with some solid experience as well. But neither one of these guys has really faced top flight competition. But for me, this is a really good crossroads fight. We'll see who the better prospect is.
Yeah, and really, John, I think that's what makes this fight so interesting. There's a lot of questions that may be answered on this night.
Yeah, I love this fight. Even though it's at 140 again, I love talking about the original 8 context as we have been. I think that these are guys that whoever wins this, will have showed enough that I feel like there is a person not there yet, but knocking on the door of the welterweight ratings, even as strong as that division is, because Prograis has really been banging, especially lately. In terms of all the punchers I see out there in boxing right now, the way his career didn't quite start out like the way he's punching now. He was a good puncher, but he's really banging guys out of there. And I've seen him on show box on a few occasions, and he's really providing excitement right now. Now he's fighting an undefeated guy in Joel Diaz Jr. I love the fight. I hope a lot of people get to see it, even though it's on ShowBox on Friday. It's definitely worth watching if you're looking for your boxing fix next weekend. You got to catch this fight. I think there's got to be something exciting that happens in this fight.
Yeah. So who's your picking to fight, John?
I like the way Prograis has been fighting. He's really gotten on my radar screen over his last 3 fights or so, and he just he's one of those guys that gets fun to watch. We've all had that as fans when you see it really coming together, and he's just blasting people out of there and exciting. You're really focused when he fights, and he's on one of those rolls right now. So going in against an undefeated guy, I think Diaz is 24-0. To see it's one of those exciting deals. Reminds you, we're going to be late on a Friday night, but there reminds you maybe of one of those old NBC Saturday afternoon fights when they'd have some of their prospects in along with
NBC Sports World.
Yeah, exactly.
Featuring Bobby Ches and Alex Ramos.
That's what I was thinking of. It's kind of like one of those Sports World fights from the Playboy Club in New Jersey. My home state.
Totowa.
Yeah, and Totowa. I've seen fights in Totowa as well. McAfee, New Jersey was the Playboy Club. A lot of those Sports World great fights were from there. Reminds me of one of those kind of fights. And, where somebody, one of these two guys is, and who knows, maybe both if the fight's good enough when they perform well. Somebody's gonna emerge from this fight and be on everybody's radar screen.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremiah, do you agree with John with Prograis here, or are you going to go with Diaz?
No. In my opinion, Diaz was the better amateur. Prograis is the better pro. I have Prograis by late stoppage here in an interesting fight. And, just to add real quickly to John's point of all the bangers that are kind of saturating these divisions anymore, I would love to see Prograis against a guy like Ivan Baranchyk, who is another up-and-coming banger. That would be, just kind of a dream fight for me. They both fight on Showtime. But, yeah, again, Prograis, he wins, late stoppage.
I think that's
all right. I'm going to bring us to some boxing news. We had some fights announced. I know one that was just announced yesterday was George Groves will be fighting Mikael Kessler next. Do you think Kessler's got enough left to deal with him, Jeremiah?
Well, I mean, what do you think about a guy who's had such a long layoff? I mean, Kessler was one of my favorites back in the day. I mean, again, as we reiterate time and time again on this show, we're not a big fan of the Super Junior divisions, but Kessler, and the whole Super 6 thing, that was pretty exciting to watch. I mean, and I remember that a lot of the Europeans were the favorites going into that. I mean, Kessler being one of them. Kessler was a guy that I watched, for a long, long time. A guy who's just well-rounded. I mean, quick hands, good jab, good power, puts his punches together, but just couldn't quite get over the hump. And, part of that is, you can attribute that to Andre Ward and Joe Kawasaki being there, So it's tough. I mean, Kessler is aged. He's had a couple of tough fights, especially against Froch. So I'm just kind of in dark about the whole thing. And I question why Kessler is going to do this. I mean,
money.
Right. But if you're being smart, I mean, if I was Kessler, I would probably take some tune-up fights, sign up for that big tournament that Sauerland and Schaefer are putting together, and then try to milk it for all it's worth. But if this is what he's doing, I mean, it kind of reminds me a bit like Ricky Hatton, where he was encouraged to take some soft touches, get back in the groove of things, but he said, no, I want to see where I'm at right now, and if that's what Kessler wants to do, fine and well. But it's borderline impossible for me to tell what he actually has left. But if he's even, 80% of what he was, in his last outing, it's a fairly even match. I mean, Groves really doesn't impress me. I like Groves, but there's just something about him that, I feel like he's never going to get over the top. Like
he's
timing,
missing something. You just can't put your finger on what it is.
He is. It's like little things when you watch him throw. Like when you look at his technique, like he doesn't really dig in with hooks. He kind of jumps up a little bit. His timing is just slightly off all the time. So, but how's Kessler's timing going to be after all these years off? I don't know. It's an interesting match. Again, if Kessler has anything like he used to, it could be a competitive fight. He could potentially win, but from what I know, I'm just going to go with a logical decision and pick Groves here.
Yeah, I think Groves wins the fight probably relatively easy, but I can say this. I think Mikhail Kessler in his prime would have destroyed George Groves. What's your take on this fight, John?
This is a time waster to me in terms of the fight happening. I would assume when we're talking about these kind of circumstantial issues, again, I don't have any direct evidence, but I would guess Mikhail Kessler needs a payday, that there is something in his life where he feels a need to get paid. And this would be, I'm with Jeremiah, I don't think George Groves is special. He's not a bad fighter, but if he's got enough to stop Chudinov at least, I could see this being a quit on the stool by Kessler or something like that, or taking a knee. He's not ready, even for Groves at this point. I just assume this must have something. And again, if he's going to fight him in the UK, we know what kind of paydays is in there, so that might tell us a lot right there. And they'll put the plastic WBA belt on it, and the British fans will chant and turn out, and Kessler will get his nice payday, and Groves will be a hero, and that little circle there, we'll all get into it, and some of us who, I'm sure some people in the UK will look at it like we do. You can't generalize, but obviously they feel they can sell it there. The fans will know who Kessler is, and I don't think Kessler goes the distance. This is one you could definitely has all the signs of taking a knee or sitting on the stool, something along those lines. Groves isn't such a big puncher that he's going to blast Kessler out in the first round or something like that. But I don't see Kessler going the distance here.
All right, now another fight that I think is a little bit similar, but I think it's going to be a lot more competitive. You got Chris Eubank Jr. Looks like he's going to fight Arthur Abraham. Now, Abraham, John, has looked all right in his last couple fights. He's got a couple decent wins, and it's not like that Eubank's a world beater. What kind of shot do you give Abraham in this fight?
I don't give him much of a shot at all. I think that, Abraham hasn't been throwing punches for years. He throws enough to beat the lower-level guys.
Well, in his prime, he never threw a lot of punches either.
Right, that's what I mean. But when he, at one time he brought more power and he did a little bit more. Arthur Abraham, for me, it's probably his time to give this recap at this point. We talked about the Super Six, and I agree, in the sense that I think maybe it gets a little glorified, but on the other hand, I'll be fair and say, just like all the other fans do, it was really a time where not too much good was happening in boxing, and it was exciting at least to see something different and to get a series of fights. And why I harken back to that myself is that I'll admit it. Sometimes you just have to admit it. I thought going into that tournament, I thought a lot of Abraham, and I thought he was a tough guy with good power, and he is a tough guy, but it was really at that tournament that I first started to see, the flaws in him, and that he just wasn't quite the fighter that I thought he was. And he just had enough of that 168 pounds where there were less and less people there, and again with all the belts and fighting in Europe, that he gets wins over just enough guys to keep relevant, but. And he climbed up, the people that ranked the 17 divisions. When the division got very weak, he climbed up near the top, and then he just got completely outboxed by Ramirez and showed nothing. So you just wonder, how much he brings to the table. I haven't seen anything that special out of Eubank myself. He fought Billy Joe Sanders. He lost. Who else has he fought? So I just think
that's the point, though. I think if Abraham has anything left, I think he at least is in the fight, where I think Kessler is going to probably get his ass whipped. But John or Jeremiah, do you agree with John that Eubank, this is a foregone conclusion?
I would heavily favor Eubank Jr. here. I mean, he's just the younger, fresher guy, and honestly, Eubank has a good amount of natural talent. I mean, if he lets his hands go, I mean, that should be good enough to beat Abraham, who he's just going to put the earmuffs on, jab every once in a while, try to land the right hand every once in a while. I mean, to Eubank's credit, he has looked like a tough guy so far. I mean, I haven't seen him wobbled. Not that he's really fought any good, skilled bangers. But again, he's looked tough. But yeah, I mean, I'm heavily favoring Eubank here. Abraham has a solid track record. I mean, he's been up there. He's been in the spotlight for a long, long time. But you just feel as if he's nearing the end of the road, and Eubank is probably going to get him out of there. My problem with the fight is. I think it's a good step up for Eubank. I mean, after all, he hasn't fought anybody on Abraham's level aside from Billy Joe Saunders, which he lost. But to his credit, I mean, I think people would view that fight as a bit closer now, especially with Saunders' mediocre performances since then. But part of my issue with this fight is, and again, John and I have talked about this before, but it's just Eubank holds this silly IBO title, and the British fans have started to make. I see these British boxing pages and British boxing fans, and they're starting to make a big deal about some stupid IBO title when, again, it's just regional. In my opinion, it's just, one of those ways to get more champions on their team, and it's just baloney, and I'm just kind of tired of hearing it.
All right, so we'll go ahead. We'll go around here. We'll give both you guys one shot to bring up something you want to talk about before we get off here. Jeremiah, we'll start with you.
Sorry. The one thing that I wanted to talk about, I suppose, is that Dmitry Kudryashov, who I don't know if either of you are familiar with him, but he fought over the weekend as well. His nickname is the Russian Hammer, which is pretty damn cool. Anyways, he fought a rematch with a trying to find his name. Sorry. Well, now I can't seem to find it. Okay, Derdola. So he fought a rematch with Derdola in Africa. He got his revenge. And I was just wondering if either of you guys have seen this fellow. I mean, he's not particularly talented, but he looks menacing, and he reminds me a bit of Julian Lederloh, where he doesn't have the skill, but in terms of raw punching power, he's up there with the best.
I haven't seen him yet. I'd like to check him out, but I have to admit I have not seen. I try to see every what I can. I have not seen him yet.
Yeah, I haven't either, so I'm going to act like you didn't even bring it up. John, you got anything you want to talk about there?
Yeah, I thought...
And see, the bad thing is, I don't even know if I could spell his name to find him on YouTube, Jeremiah, so you'll have to send me a link.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Russian guy.
Sorry. Well, let me just bring this up instead. But have you seen who's already signed up for the super tournament that Schaefer and Sauerland are putting together? Yeah,
I saw a couple of them, the cruiserweights.
Yeah. So they got Gassiev already, Vladarchik, the old-time cruiserweight, and I'm trying to think of who else. But I'm excited just to have those two names on there, which means that we might have some serious competition.
Surprisingly, they got Golacki, too.
Yes. So I think that we're going to have Super Six. I don't know how many guys they're planning on injecting into the tournament itself, but with those guys already signing up, I've got some high hopes for this.
Well, I'm a little bit more encouraged when I saw who ended up in it, and I'm going to credit, without, again, direct evidence, I'm going to credit the Schaefer-Heyman team. It's always been reported, all reports, that they respect each other a lot. They like each other personally in terms of doing business together. And, Schaefer had a non-compete with Golden Boy, and that is a contractual thing. He could not be active for a while, and then that expired. So he got back in there. What I'm getting to is the guys that signed up that surprised me, and then I'm getting a little bit more encouraged, is that these are all guys that have fought on PBC as well. So you got to think there's a little bit of a plan there with Richard Schaefer and Al Heyman. And I like if those two guys are together. I think combined, they got a chance to do some good things. And I would see this now, and he's a guy I like a lot, and I'm not as high on Usyk as I was a couple of fights ago, that now I like this because, to me, this could be like a showcase for Gassiev and springboard him to the heavyweight division. Maybe if he gets a couple of spectacular knockouts over some quality fighters who are going to be in there, that maybe this could be a showcase moment for him.
Yeah, and Marius Briedis has also signed up, the guy who beat Huck in his last outing, so that's a solid addition right now, but in my opinion, I've got Gassiev as the favorite.
Yeah, it's looking better than I thought it was going to be when they said that they were going to go with super middleweight cruiserweight. So I got to say, it's an encouraging development. I have a lot more interest in it in a couple weeks.
Well, I think overall, boxing has had a bounce-back year from last year, which I think was a mediocre year at best. So it looks like everything is starting to turn, maybe go in the right direction anyways, finally.
Yeah, and I agree. And I actually think that a tournament is real good for boxing. I mean, honestly, I would like to see more of them because,
people love tournaments.
They do. Look at the Sweet 16 and how successful it is. If you could put a tournament together like this every year in divisions that are loaded with talent, and that's going to do a ton for sports betting. It's going to inject a lot of money into it. We'll have something to look forward to every year. If they could keep this up, they do really well for themselves.
Yeah, it's one thing that would really help. In Pride MMA in Japan, they used to do it all the time, and it worked well and was really popular. And they would, in that crazy setting, they would do things on the same day, have fights on the same day.
Yeah, they had like 8 or 16 guys fighting a tournament on the same day, wasn't it?
Right. It was kind of brutal, but the tournament concept was good.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We're a little over an hour right now. So I want to remind everybody to check out John's Original 8. He's got them for every division. But today he put out the light heavyweight division, so go check that out at www.thegruelingtruth.com. Then you can check out all of our other boxing articles, our boxing shows. We've got Boxing Legend shows, which just in the last day or two we put up former welterweight contender Armando Muniz. We've had guys like Carlos Palomino, Lamont Peterson, Rasheed Warren, Tim Witherspoon, a little bit of everybody that's been on there, so make sure you check that out also. You can catch all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.